Breaking news from the world of entertainment. We have received word that music legend Ozzy Osbourne has died.
Legends never fade away quietly. An hour before Ozzy Osbourne took his final breath, the full weight of his last wish became clear, and it was devastating. He didn't want to be remembered as a frail old man. He wanted one last taste of the fire, one final moment on stage. This is the story of that wish and how it became a heartbreaking memory for his son, Jack, the final whisper. In his final weeks, the house was eerily quiet. A soft breeze would drift through the curtains of their sprawling countryside estate, a secluded property that felt like its own private island, cut off from the noise of the world. But inside, time moved differently, as if it was holding its breath for what was to come. Sharon sat beside him, her hand wrapped around his. Ozzy, a man who once commanded stadiums with a single scream, now spoke in low, soft tones. Truth be told, it wasn't because he had nothing left to say. His mind was still sharp, but his body was failing him. Parkinson's was a cruel thief, relentlessly stealing his strength and control. It was a brutal twist of fate. The same man who once leaped across stages like a bolt of lightning now struggled just to sit up. Some days, even lifting a spoon was a monumental task. He once admitted the past 4 years had been sheer torment for him, his health in a terrible state. Yet his spirit was untouched. His wit was as sharp as ever, and the mischievous spark in his eyes still burned brightly. "This body's broken," he'd say with a little grin, "but the brain is still partying." Every morning his first request was simple: tea and Sharon. They'd sit for hours, lost in memories. He'd talk about his childhood in Aston, the bitter cold and the constant hunger. He'd chuckle about his first gig, terrified but totally electrified. He'd speak of his brothers in Black Sabbath with so much love. Then his voice would get quiet, especially when he spoke of his children, Kelly with her fiery spirit, Jack his steady rock, and Amy his quiet strength. "Promise me," he whispered to Sharon one night, "they'll remember the fire, not the flicker." Sharon had seen this man through everything, but never like this. He was physically diminished, yet his soul was more alive than ever. Then came the moment that changed everything. It was late June of 2025. As the sun set, Ozzy turned to her, his eyes clearer than they had been in weeks. He whispered the words that would set an impossible plan in motion. "I don't want them to remember a man in a wheelchair," he pleaded. "I want to give them one last roar, where it all began." It wasn't just a request, it was his final act of rebellion. And with that single whisper, a secret mission was born, one that would push his family to the edge and test the limits of love itself. For over 4 decades, Sharon Osbourne was more than a wife. She was Ozzy's protector, his anchor, the architect of his legendary career. She stood by him through his darkest struggles and his most glorious comebacks. Ozzy was the chaos, and Sharon was the steel. But now their roles had flipped. It was her turn to face the chaos and turn a dying man's whisper into a thunderous farewell. Believe it or not, she didn't tell a soul at first, not even the kids. She held the secret close, protecting it like a fragile flame. Doctors told her it was impossible, that the strain could be the very thing that ended his life. Friends called it a dangerous fantasy. Even Ozzy, in his moments of doubt, would beg her to let it go. "I'm done, Sharon," he'd rasp. "Don't make me a fool." But she just shook her head. "You're not done," she would say, "not until the music stops." Behind the scenes, she worked tirelessly. She negotiated with managers, fought with medical staff, and coordinated with producers, all to secure one night, just one, under strict supervision. Every phone call was a battle, every approval a small miracle. But Sharon never backed down. She knew this wasn't just about a concert, it was about giving a man the dignity to choose his own ending. It was about letting him burn bright one last time, even if it used up all his remaining light. When Ozzy could barely walk, she helped him rehearse in whispers. When his hands trembled too much to hold a microphone, she wrapped her hands around his and told him, "Let the world hear your goodbye." This wasn't just a wife honoring a wish, it was a warrior carrying out a final command. She was giving him back the only thing he had left to say, not with words, but with a song. The weight of it all was immense, but she never let it show, forging ahead to give the world back its Prince of Darkness. Not as a patient, but as the storm he always was. To understand why this one last show mattered so much, you have to go back to the very beginning. Because Ozzy Osbourne's story was never really about fame, it was about survival through sound. His final wish wasn't just about singing, it was about rewriting the last page of a life that had been defined by defiance. Born John Michael Osbourne on December 3, 1948, in a tough, working-class part of Birmingham, Ozzy grew up with nothing. His world was soot-covered streets and the constant clang of factories. At school, he was an outcast, struggling with bullies and an undiagnosed learning disability that made him feel worthless. By 17, he'd landed in jail for burglary, convinced he had no future. Society had written him off, but in that darkness he found music. It wasn't an escape, it was oxygen. Then, in 1968, he teamed up with Tony Iommi, Geezer Butler, and Bill Ward. They formed Black Sabbath, a band that didn't just change music, they created a genre. Their sound was heavy, dark, and raw. Critics hated it, but a generation of kids who felt lost and angry heard their own truth in Ozzy's voice. Songs like Paranoid and War Pigs became anthems for the misunderstood. But Ozzy's inner demons were relentless. By 1979, his struggles with substances got him fired from the very band he helped create. Most people thought his career was over, but Ozzy always had a way of coming back. In 1980, he released Blizzard of Oz, a solo album that made him bigger than ever. Crazy Train became a global phenomenon. Through it all, he stumbled, he fell, and he got back up, always returning to the music. He won Grammys, got into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and even became a beloved TV star on The Osbournes. He let the world see him not just as a rock god, but as a clumsy, funny, and loving father. That's why his final wish was so important. It was a man who had given everything to the stage, asking for one last chance to let the stage give something back to him. As the world unknowingly neared Ozzy's final days, one city became the heart of it all. Not Los Angeles, not New York, but Birmingham. The city that gave him his start was now ready to give him a hero's farewell. They called it the Summer of Sabbath, a months-long tribute that turned the entire city into a living monument to its most famous son. From May to July of 2025, Birmingham was buzzing with Ozzy's music and memory. His face was on banners hanging from lampposts, and giant murals of him covered the sides of buildings. The city even renamed one of its main bridges the Osbourne Bridge. It was a powerful symbol, a connection between the poor boy he was and the immortal icon he became. A stunning bronze statue was also unveiled, capturing Ozzy mid-scream, a permanent tribute to his fiery spirit. Here's the thing, Birmingham was once a place Ozzy ran from, a town that didn't understand him. But now, in his final weeks, it was the city that rose up to hold him. Fans poured in from all over the world. They flew in from the United States, from South America, from all over Europe. You saw 3 generations of fans standing side by side, from elderly fans holding original records to teenagers with fresh Ozzy tattoos. Villa Park, the stadium chosen for his final show, became a site of pilgrimage. Yet through all the celebration and joy, a heartbreaking secret loomed. Sharon never let on that this wasn't just another concert. It was a carefully planned goodbye. The city was soaked in hope, with fans believing the Prince of Darkness would roar again and keep on roaring. But this incredible celebration was just the beautiful sunlit calm before the storm, a final party before an unthinkable farewell. The last night of thunder. It was more than a concert, it was the last heartbeat of a legend. On July 5th, 2025, under the bright lights of Villa Park, 40,000 people gathered for a moment that would be burned into rock history forever. The world was about to watch Ozzy Osbourne come home one last time. Sharon, the architect of this miracle, had done the impossible. She had secretly reunited the original members of Black Sabbath, Tony Iommi, Geezer Butler, and Bill Ward, for the first time in 2 decades. And she didn't stop there. She brought together the biggest names in rock, from Metallica to Guns N' Roses, for what was called the Back to the Beginning concert. At the end of the day, it was a living, breathing farewell scripted by love. Then the moment arrived. Ozzy appeared. He wasn't walking or standing. He was seated on a massive black steel throne, rolled onto the stage like a king returning to his kingdom. The roar from the crowd was a mix of thunder and tears. He lifted the microphone and opened with "Mama, I'm coming home." His voice, though weaker, cracked through the night air like lightning. Every word felt like a final goodbye. He delivered the final anthem of his life, "Crazy Train." As the opening riff tore through the stadium, a small, knowing smile spread across Ozzy's face. This is where he belonged. He didn't give a long speech. There were just tears, a nod, and a silent connection with the 40,000 souls screaming his name. As fireworks lit up the sky, his eyes locked with Sharon's, a silent message passing between them. "I'm home. I'm free." The performance was over, a farewell carved in steel and sound, but the final, heartbreaking chapter was still to come. On July 22nd, 2025, just 17 days after that epic concert, Ozzy Osbourne took his final breath. The man who had defied the odds time and time again was gone. He didn't slip away in silence. He left on his own terms, with the sound of applause still echoing in the air. At his bedside were the people who loved him most. Sharon held his hand, never letting go. Their children, Jack, Kelly, and Amy, were right there with her. It was a quiet, peaceful end. There were no dramatic last words, just silent tears and the shared understanding that he was finally free from pain. "He looked at me one last time," Sharon would later say, "and I knew." He was ready. The world, however, was not. The news sent shockwaves across the globe. The hashtag #ThankYouOzzy trended in over 60 countries. This is where the true weight of that final wish hit his family, especially Jack. Seeing his father use every last ounce of his strength for that show, only to depart so soon after, was a devastating realization. It wasn't the wish itself that broke him, but the beautiful, heartbreaking finality of it all. Tributes poured in from everyone. Sir Elton John called him a rebel poet. Paul McCartney said, "Legends don't die, they echo." His bandmate Tony Iommi wrote, "My dear, dear friend is gone. We shared a lifetime. There will never be another." Memorial concerts were announced, and Metallica even renamed their world tour the Crazy Train Legacy Tour. Ozzy's final wish, fulfilled by his warrior wife, wasn't just a concert. It was his last masterpiece, a final act of power and grace. He left this world not as a patient, but as the legend he always was, ensuring his roar would echo for eternity. Was it right to let him risk everything for one last show, or should his final days have been spent in peace? Like and subscribe for more.